In 1966, a television show almost didn't happen. The network rejected it twice. The studio nearly canceled it after just one season. Yet today, Star Trek has spawned 14 series, 13 films, and a cultural phenomenon that changed entertainment forever. But here's what most fans don't know: the show that saved itself wasn't saved by executives or network decisions. It was saved by something far more unusual, and it happened in a way that shocked everyone involved. Before Star Trek became a legend, it was a disaster nobody wanted to touch. Gene Roddenberry had a vision. In 1964, he pitched a science fiction series to NBC. The executives listened politely. Then they said no. The concept was too weird. Space operas didn't work on television. Nobody cared about aliens and strange worlds. That's what they believed. So Roddenberry did something unusual. He made the pilot anyway, using his own money and favors from friends in the industry. The pilot episode was called The Cage. It featured Captain Christopher Pike, not James T. Kirk. It showed a crew exploring an alien planet. It was strange, philosophical, and nothing like television had ever seen before. When NBC finally watched it, they rejected it again. This time, they were direct: the show was too cerebral. Too slow. Too different. But Roddenberry refused to quit. He convinced NBC to let him make one more pilot. This time, they would try a different approach. A new captain. More action. Faster pacing. In 1966, Where No One Has Gone Before aired as the second pilot. It introduced William Shatner as Captain James T. Kirk. The network still wasn't excited, but they gave the show a slot on Thursday nights at 8:30 p.m., what executives called the death slot for television. Thursday was when shows went to die. Nobody predicted what would happen next. The first episode aired on September 8, 1966. The ratings were modest. The sponsors weren't thrilled. Inside NBC's offices, executives were already planning the show's cancellation. But something strange was happening in American living rooms. People were watching. More importantly, people were talking about it. Yet what happened behind the scenes was even stranger than anything on screen. While male executives dismissed Star Trek, a woman was quietly building an empire that would save the entire franchise. Dorothy Fontana was a secretary. That's what her job title said. But she was actually a writer, a producer, and one of the most important creative forces behind Star Trek's success. In 1966, this was revolutionary. Women didn't have power in Hollywood. They answered phones. They took notes. They stayed invisible. Dorothy Fontana refused to be invisible. She started as Gene Roddenberry's assistant, but she quickly became something more. She wrote some of the show's most famous episodes, including The Trouble with Tribbles, which became a fan favorite that still gets quoted today. She fought for stronger scripts. She advocated for better character development. She pushed back against executives who wanted to make the show simpler and more violent. Most importantly, she understood something the male executives didn't: the audience wanted meaning, not just action. Fontana recognized that Star Trek wasn't just science fiction. It was social commentary wrapped in a starship. Every episode could explore real-world problems: racism, war, poverty, identity, but dressed up in alien makeup and futuristic technology. This approach was controversial. Some sponsors complained. Some network executives thought it was too risky. But Dorothy Fontana knew that audiences were smarter than the industry gave them credit for. She also fought for the show's female characters in an era when women on television were mostly decorative. Uhura, played by Nichelle Nichols, became a breakthrough character not by accident but because Fontana and others pushed for her to have real storylines and agency. When Shatner's Kirk kissed Uhura on screen, it was groundbreaking television. It was also intentional. It was a statement. Behind every great creative achievement, there's usually someone working in the shadows, fighting battles nobody sees. Dorothy Fontana's influence extended far beyond individual episodes. She shaped the entire philosophy of the show during its crucial first season. Without her, Star Trek might have become just another space adventure. Instead, it became something that could actually matter. But the strangest part of her story came much later, and it revealed a secret about the show's origins that almost nobody knew. Gene Roddenberry had a hidden agenda that he never fully revealed to the network, and it changed everything about what Star Trek would become. In the 1960s, America was torn apart. The civil rights movement was reaching its peak. The Vietnam War was escalating. Young people were questioning authority. Roddenberry understood something crucial: science fiction could be a Trojan horse. You could sneak important ideas past network censors if you wrapped them in phaser guns and alien planets. The executives would approve scripts about alien conflicts that were really about racism. They'd greenlight episodes about strange cultures that were commentary on colonialism. Roddenberry was playing a long game, and he was winning. But there was another secret hidden in plain sight. Roddenberry had studied anthropology and sociology. He built the show's foundation on real academic principles. The Starship crew wasn't random. It was deliberately multicultural. Lieutenant Hikaru Sulu was Japanese, appointed choice in 1966, just 21 years after World War II ended. Scotty was Scottish. Chekhov was Russian, introduced during the Cold War, when depicting Soviets as heroic was genuinely controversial. This wasn't accidental diversity. This was intentional philosophy broadcast into American homes every single week. The network didn't fully understand what Roddenberry was doing. They thought they were approving a simple space adventure. They had no idea they were sanctioning the most progressive show on television. When an episode about prejudice aired, it wasn't labeled as social commentary. It was just the episode where Kirk meets the aliens. But viewers understood. They got the message beneath the message. There was also a secret about the show's most famous element, the Prime Directive. This principle, that Starfleet wouldn't interfere in other civilizations' development, was Roddenberry's personal philosophy about American foreign policy. It was his critique of American interventionism, disguised as futuristic ethics. Week after week, the show asked the question, should a powerful nation impose its values on others? In 1966, that was a radical question to ask on mainstream television. Even the show's optimism was revolutionary. In an era of cynicism and fear, Star Trek presented a future where humanity had evolved beyond tribalism and violence. Where we had learned to work together. Where we had solved poverty and disease. Network executives probably thought this was just escapism. They didn't realize Roddenberry was presenting a vision of what humanity could become, if we chose to change. The most shocking part came when people started writing letters. Thousands of them. Star Trek was about to be cancelled. NBC had made the decision. The ratings weren't high enough. The sponsors weren't interested. The show had survived 2 seasons, but the network was pulling the plug. Behind closed doors, executives were already planning what would replace it in the fall of 1969. Then something unprecedented happened. Fans organized. A woman named Bijo Trimble started a letter-writing campaign. She coordinated with other fans across the country. They didn't just write polite notes. They organized a massive, coordinated effort. Thousands of letters arrived at NBC's offices. Then tens of thousands. The mailroom was overwhelmed. Executives' desks were buried under envelopes. The volume was so enormous that NBC couldn't ignore it. This was before the internet. Before social media. Before any mechanism existed for fans to organize at scale. Yet they did it anyway. They made phone calls. They organized through fan clubs and science fiction conventions. They created a movement using nothing but determination and paper. The network was shocked. They had never seen anything like this. No television show had ever generated this kind of fan response. Network executives realized something crucial. This show had touched people in a way that ratings didn't measure. It had created loyalty. It had inspired passion. It had mattered to people's lives in ways the industry didn't have metrics for. NBC capitulated. They commissioned a 3rd season. Star Trek would continue. But here's what makes this story even stranger. The letter-writing campaign worked so well that it changed how the entertainment industry understood audience power. It proved that dedicated fans could override corporate decisions. It created a template that would be used repeatedly in the decades to come. When shows got cancelled, fans would organize. When movies faced criticism, fan movements would emerge. Star Trek didn't just save itself. It invented fan activism as we know it. The irony was profound. The show that presented a vision of humanity working together had actually inspired humanity to work together in real life. Fans had banded together for a common cause. They had used their collective voice to challenge a powerful institution. In a strange way, they had lived out the show's ideals. Yet even this wasn't the most shocking secret hiding in Star Trek's history. Most people watch Star Trek for the action and the aliens. But hidden beneath nearly every episode was a layer of meaning so sophisticated that even modern viewers miss it on first viewing. Take Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, an episode from the 3rd season. On the surface, it's about 2 aliens, one with the left side of their face white and the right side black, the other the exact opposite. They're locked in an eternal conflict. Kirk has to stop them from destroying each other. Most viewers saw it as a straightforward anti-racism message. And it was. But it was also something more dangerous. The episode was a direct commentary on how arbitrary racial divisions are. The 2 aliens were identical except for which side of their face was colored. Their hatred had no logical basis. It was pure tribalism. The show was saying something radical: racism has no foundation in reality. It exists only because we decide it exists. In 1968, when this episode aired, that was a genuinely controversial statement to broadcast nationally. But there was a deeper layer. The episode suggested that both sides were equally culpable. Neither alien was more right than the other. Both were trapped in a cycle of hatred that neither could escape. This was Roddenberry's commentary on America itself, that both sides of racial conflict were caught in systems they didn't create and couldn't easily abandon. It was sociology wrapped in science fiction. Other episodes contained hidden meanings that were even more sophisticated. A Private Little War was ostensibly about Kirk helping a peaceful civilization defend itself against aggression. But it was actually Roddenberry's critique of American military strategy in Vietnam. The episode showed how introducing weapons to a conflict escalates violence rather than resolving it. How the presence of outside military power corrupts local societies. How good intentions pave the road to disaster. Network censors approved the script because they didn't fully understand what Roddenberry was saying. The show also contained messages about gender and sexuality that were years ahead of their time. Uhura's prominence as a senior bridge officer was revolutionary. The relationship between Kirk and Spock, their deep emotional bond, resonated with audiences in ways the network didn't anticipate. Some fans understood subtext that the creators themselves might not have fully intended, yet the show allowed space for those interpretations. Even the show's famous atheism was hidden in plain sight. Roddenberry was an open. Leonard Nimoy was supposed to be a minor character. Spock was written as a secondary role, the science officer who occasionally delivered exposition. Nobody predicted that he would become the heart of the show. Nobody predicted that his character would nearly tear the production apart. Nimoy was a Shakespearean actor. He took the role seriously in ways that surprised everyone. He invented Spock's mannerisms, the raised eyebrow, the Vulcan salute, the logical speech patterns. These weren't in the script. Nimoy created them. He understood that Spock needed to be alien in ways that went beyond makeup and costume. He needed to move differently. Think differently. Exist in a fundamentally different way from humans. The problem was that William Shatner felt threatened. Shatner was the star. He was Captain Kirk. The show should be about him. Yet audiences were becoming fascinated with Spock. Fan mail for Nimoy started arriving in larger quantities than mail for Shatner. Women were writing passionate letters about the logical Vulcan. The dynamic had shifted in ways Shatner hadn't anticipated. This created tension on set. Shatner began demanding more screen time. He wanted bigger moments. He wanted Kirk to be more central to every episode. The production became fractured. Actors took sides. Some supported Shatner. Others recognized that Spock had become essential to the show's appeal. Gene Roddenberry had to navigate this minefield carefully. If he sided too openly with Nimoy, Shatner might leave. If he sided with Shatner, the show would lose its most compelling character dynamic. The solution came through the writing. Scripts began featuring more scenes between Kirk and Spock. Their relationship became the emotional core of the series. The tension between them, the captain's intuition versus the science officer's logic, became the show's central conflict. This wasn't planned. It emerged from the actors' chemistry and the production's internal politics. But there was a darker element to this story. Nimoy didn't want to be Spock. He worried that playing an alien would typecast him forever. He wanted to do Shakespeare. He wanted to be taken seriously as a dramatic actor. Playing a logical alien in a science fiction show felt beneath him. So he began pushing back against the role. He resisted some character choices. He complained about the makeup taking hours to apply. He expressed frustration with the fan obsession with Spock. This created a paradox. The character that saved Star Trek was played by an actor who didn't want to play it. Nimoy's reluctance actually made Spock more compelling. His internal conflict leaked into the performance. Spock struggled to balance his Vulcan logic with his human half-mirrored Nimoy's actual internal struggle about the role. Years later, Nimoy would make peace with Spock. He would eventually embrace the character. But in those early years, the show's greatest asset was also its greatest liability. What nobody knew was that this internal conflict would reshape the entire franchise. Star Trek ended in 1969. It had lasted 3 seasons and 79 episodes. By network standards, it was a failure. It never achieved top 10 ratings. It never became a mainstream hit during its original run. Yet something extraordinary happened after it ended. The show refused to die. Reruns began airing in syndication. Slowly, methodically, Star Trek found a new audience. People who had never seen it during its original broadcast discovered it. Young people found it. College students watched it between classes. Science fiction fans obsessed over it. The show that networks thought was dead became more alive than ever. By the 1970s, Star Trek conventions were drawing thousands of people. Fans were creating their own stories. They were writing fan fiction. They were creating art. They were building a community around a show that had been cancelled. This phenomenon was completely new. Television shows didn't do this. They ended. People moved on. But Star Trek created something that persisted beyond its cancellation. It created a universe that fans felt ownership of. They didn't just watch the show. They inhabited it. They lived in it. This changed everything about how the entertainment industry understood storytelling. Networks realized that some shows could have value beyond their initial broadcast ratings. That cultural impact could be measured in ways Nielsen ratings couldn't capture. That a dedicated fan base could sustain a franchise indefinitely. Star Trek proved this. It opened the door for other shows to find second lives in syndication. The show also changed what science fiction could be on television. Before Star Trek, science fiction was considered genre entertainment, not serious, not prestigious. After Star Trek, serious actors would do science fiction. Prestigious networks would invest in it. Major film studios would produce it. The entire landscape of American entertainment shifted because one show had refused to disappear. Star Trek also democratized storytelling. Fan fiction, stories created by fans rather than professional writers, was considered radical and illegitimate before Star Trek. Fan conventions were seen as weird gatherings of obsessives. But Star Trek legitimized both. It showed that audiences could be co-creators. That fans weren't passive consumers but active participants in meaning-making. This philosophy would eventually shape how entertainment works in the internet age. The show's influence extended into real science and technology. NASA astronauts cited Star Trek as inspiration. Scientists said the show motivated them to pursue space exploration. The vision of a multicultural, optimistic future inspired people to actually try to build that future. Nichelle Nichols, who played Uhura, became a NASA recruiter. She traveled the country trying to recruit minorities into the space program, directly inspired by her role on the show. Star Trek didn't just entertain. It changed how people saw possibility. It changed how they saw themselves. It changed what they believed humanity could become. And that's only the beginning of what this show would ultimately accomplish. If you're enjoying these stories that reveal the hidden histories behind the things we love, make sure you subscribe because the next video explores secrets from another cultural phenomenon that changed everything. Before we dive into the strangest details nobody knows, do you think you would have made the same choice as Gene Roddenberry, risking your career to sneak progressive messages past network censors? Let me know in the comments below. Now, here are the 20 weird facts about Star Trek that even dedicated fans rarely discover. 1. William Shatner's famous line, "To boldly go where no one has gone before," split an infinitive intentionally. Linguists complained. The network wanted it changed. Roddenberry refused. He understood that breaking grammar rules made the phrase more memorable and more revolutionary. 2. Spock's Vulcan salute wasn't created by Leonard Nimoy. It came from a Jewish blessing Nimoy remembered from his childhood synagogue. He adapted it for the character, creating one of television's most iconic gestures. 3. The transporter was invented because the budget couldn't afford landing sequences. They needed a way to get from the ship to planets cheaply. Necessity created one of science fiction's most famous technologies. 4. NBC almost cast a different actor as Kirk. They wanted someone more conventionally handsome. Shatner got the role partly because he was available and affordable, not because he was the first choice. 5. Uhura's name was never explained on screen. It comes from the Swahili word uhuru, meaning freedom. Roddenberry embedded African cultural references into the show without the network noticing. 6. DeForest Kelley, who played Dr. McCoy, was a real medical school dropout. He brought authentic medical knowledge to the role, making the medical scenes more credible than they should have been. 7. The show's budget was so tight that props were recycled constantly. The same alien devices appeared in different episodes as different technologies. Fans eventually noticed and created elaborate theories about their actual purposes. 8. Nichelle Nichols almost quit after the first season. She felt her character was underused. A fan convinced her to stay. That fan was Martin Luther King Jr., who told her that Uhura represented something important for African American representation. 9. George Takei, who played Sulu, was a closeted gay man during the show's run. He didn't come out publicly until decades later. His presence on the show, though he couldn't be open about his identity, still represented a kind of progress. 10. The show's special effects were so primitive that some scenes were filmed backward and then reversed. Explosions were created using controlled fires and practical effects. Modern CGI didn't exist, yet the show looked futuristic. 11. James Doohan, who played Scotty, was a decorated war veteran who had lost a finger in combat. He hid this during filming, keeping his hand positioned carefully so viewers wouldn't notice. 12. The show pioneered the concept of the retcon, retroactive continuity. When writers needed to contradict previous episodes, they simply rewrote history. This technique became standard in serialized storytelling. 13. Roddenberry was originally going to make the show far darker and grittier. Test audiences rejected it. They wanted hope. They wanted to believe in a better future. So Roddenberry rewrote the entire concept to be more optimistic. 14. The Klingon were designed to look threatening because the network wanted clear villains. But Roddenberry always intended for them to become complex characters, enemies who could also be understood and negotiated with. 15. The show's theme song was composed by Alexander Courage, who also wrote the iconic Twilight Zone theme. He created the music in just a few hours. It was never meant to be iconic. It just was. 16. NBC executives wanted to cancel the show after episode 1. Only an internal advocate within the network fought to keep it alive for a second episode. If that one person had stayed silent, Star Trek would have ended after 90 minutes. 17. The original series was filmed in color, but many episodes aired in black and white on some local stations. This created alternate versions of episodes that looked completely different depending on where you watched them. 18. Gene Roddenberry secretly worked on Star Trek scripts while still being paid by another studio. He was technically violating his contract. If discovered, it could have destroyed his career and the show. 19. The show's final episode, Turnabout Intruder, was considered so bad by the production team that they tried to prevent it from being the series finale. It aired anyway, leaving fans with an episode many considered terrible. 20. Star Trek's cancellation was partly because it aired on Thursday nights opposite The Flying Nun and Bewitched. These lighter, more mainstream shows pulled viewers away. The genius of Star Trek was crushed by scheduling decisions, not by the show's actual quality. But here's the deepest truth about Star Trek: it succeeded not because everything went right, but because people refused to let it fail. Dorothy Fontana fought for better scripts. Fans wrote letters. Actors brought depth to underdeveloped roles. Writers snuck progressive messages past censors. Everyone involved fought for something they believed in. And that's the real legacy. Star Trek taught us that individual passion, collective action, and refusing to accept failure can change everything. Many people watching have gone through moments where something you loved was threatened with cancellation, whether that's a show, a dream, or a part of your life. If you've ever fought to keep something alive that mattered to you, you understand what made Star Trek possible. The story of Star Trek doesn't end here. It continues in 14 television series, 13 films, and countless stories still being created today. But this story isn't the only mystery that remained unsolved in television history. The next video on this channel reveals something even more surprising, a show that almost destroyed an entire network, and the secrets that nearly came out before it was too late. Thank you for watching. If you learned something new today, you've helped us build a community of people who care about the real stories behind the things we love.